week we had, for the few weeks, we've been talking about creating a culture of honor in the church, which ironically enough, this is part of that, like what we're talking about right now. If we have a culture of honor, we can give space for the obscure, the things we don't understand, and assume the best about those people while we try to work that out, okay? And church and community and family should be a place where we can work that out and have space to work that out. Right? And so a part of that is towards the end of the message, I begin to talk, of course, unplanned as typical, I begin to talk a little bit about unity in that. And very, very briefly touched on that, but there was something obscure that just began to happen with me as I was talking about it. There was just this overwhelming sense of presence that literally my body was vibrating, to be honest with you. It was just this vibration that was happening as I was talking about it, and I knew immediately the Lord was on that the Lord really wanted to emphasize the importance of unity in this body. Especially as we're pulling people from very, very, very diverse and different backgrounds. And I know you look in here and you say, we're not as diverse as you think you are. And you're right. I'm not near as diverse as I want to be, especially as it relates to race and ethnicity. But I feel like in America, the only kind of diversity people want to celebrate is racial and ethnic diversity, which is huge. The thing is when we're talking about cultural diversity, when we talk about diversity of political minds and how you view the world, diversity of religious background, we have a copious amount of that in this room right now. And I believe that the other areas of diversity will continue to grow. But and at least that's my heart. And I think the heart of those in this room, because I do believe that our church should look as diverse as the kingdom of God. So, but part of that means that we have to learn to also create this culture of unity and to be in unity in the place of family community, okay? And so we spent a bit of time as we were going through our partnership training teaching you specifically about how the body of Christ is a family. Not a nominal thing, not a, we just call each other brother so-and-so and sister so-and-so, but like He is our Father and you are sons and daughters. And if you're a son or daughter and I'm a son or daughter, that makes us family. The problem is many churches don't feel that kind of family because we don't honor the reality of that relationship that is made possible. And because we don't honor it, we just treat you as like a person that we pass by on Sunday morning. We wave, how you doing? It's this superficial, like, hey, what's up? And like you're really not interested in an answer because you're still walking by as you're saying, what's up? Right? And so we don't experience that. And that's one of the things that this church, specifically in this expression, is trying to change here, because one of our core values is that we value authentic connection with each other. We're not interested in superficial. We're not interested in your mask. We want to create a space where you can take all of that off and just be you and learn to find connection and community there. But for that to happen, I think family and unity within that context is incredibly important. And so I have a passage that I want to read from in Exodus 17, verses 8 through 13. And this is a passage that I usually talk about when I'm teaching on leadership. This is probably the first time I've read the passage and thought about it from the context of unity. And so I want to read this to you, and then I'll set it up, and we'll get to where we're going after that, okay? So Exodus 17, starting in verse 8. While the people of Israel were still at Rephidim, the warriors of Amalek attacked them. Moses commanded Joshua, choose some men to go out and fight the army of Amalek for us. Tomorrow I will stand at the top of the hill holding the staff of God in my hand. Okay, so of course this is Moses speaking to them. So Joshua did what Moses had commanded and fought the army of Amalek. Meanwhile, Moses, Aaron, and Hur climbed to the top of the nearby hill. As long as Moses held up the staff in his hand, the Israelites had the advantage. But whenever he dropped his hand, I'm not even going to try that. Gained the advantage. Right now it's just not clicking, sorry. Gained the advantage. Moses' arms soon became so tired he could no longer hold them up. So Aaron and Hur found a stone for him to sit on. Then they stood on each side of Moses, holding up his hands, so his hands held steady until the sun set. As a result, Joshua overwhelmed the army of Amalek in the battle. Okay, so cool story, right? But what you have to understand about the context of this story, and we see it particularly in the first line, is it seems that the Israelites are kind of minding their own business. Now, of course, they've been delivered out of Egypt. They're trying to find their way to the promised land. But as this happening, it seems that Amalek came and attacked them, right? And in response to that attack, the Israelites get together. Moses mobilizes Joshua to say, oh, now we have to respond to this attack that is now happening to us, right? And I feel like this story and the way this story is set up is so true for much of us in the room, because maybe you're doing things right. Like God's given you a word, you're following the Lord the best way you know how, or you're just doing life the best way you know how in your current context. And you're going through your process, and in the middle of your process, all of a sudden, it just seems like you get whacked. I mean, it's just like out of nowhere, you're getting hit over the back of the head by every single circumstance that is coming at you, and it's like a domino effect, right? So it's like, it's not enough that you're trying to do the best you can. You're where you're supposed to be, saying what you're supposed to be. You're connected to the right people, right? Everything should go my way. Like everything is supposed to be right. God, I'm honoring you with my life. I volunteer in this group. Every volunteer opportunity there is, I'm at it. I try to be a good husband or a good wife, a good parent. I try to be a good friend. I try to be a good colleague. I'm doing what I can, and all around me, the world just seems to be crashing in. If you remember, God, you sent me on this path. You told me to go here. And in the middle of my going, I'm finding myself in a battle. I'm finding myself in a war. And I don't know why this is happening. I feel like this is the place that some of us are at, because we're walking through this thing the best we know how, and all of a sudden the dominoes just keep falling down. And I think what we have to be reminded in this context is that when we begin to follow God, God never promises us that it's going to be easy. And see, that's the thing, is we think as soon as we give our life to God and we begin to do all the things that are right, or we do all the things the best we know how, that everything in our life is supposed to be smooth sailing, no problems, no issues, no nothing. It's just going to be easy. It's going to be good. No resistance. The problem with that is that, God calls you more than a conqueror, and it seems like a waste of words to call you more than a conqueror if he has no expectation for you to go conquer. Like, it wouldn't make a lot of sense for him to say that. Right? Why would he release his power and empower you to do all of these things unless he intended for you to do something with it? See, we have to be reminded that just because we're going through a process, just because we're going through a battle or a challenge or a difficulty or some sort of resistance in our life, that doesn't mean that God has left us. It doesn't mean that we have misstepped. It doesn't mean that we're doing anything wrong. It doesn't mean that we're bad or broken or any of those things. It just means maybe you might be on the right path. It might be that the enemy is threatened by your process because they can see where you're headed, and so it warrants the attack all the more. So it's not that you're doing it wrong. It's not that you're not doing it right. It's just that maybe you're following him in such a way that it's causing the conflict and the resistance to be ever present in your life. See, there are some battles that you're going to have to fight. You need to know that. This is not a bait and switch. There are some battles you're going to have to fight. Let me connect this to what we were talking to just a moment ago. We were talking about wanting to establish a culture of unity and community, family right here, right? Okay. How many of your families are conflict-free? How many of your marriages, don't look at your wives, wives don't look at you? Yeah, don't do that. Listen, I made my mad last night. I really ain't looking over there, okay? All right? It's true. I mean, it just is what it is. But how many of those relationships are conflict-free? Okay, so what am I saying? When you produce an invitation for that level of relationship, and I'm going to use the word intimacy, just don't make it perverted. You understand? I'm just talking about a closeness. if we promote an invitation for intimacy in that way, you also open the door for a likelihood of conflict. But because conflict in the past has always been so difficult, it's left us damaged, it's left us broken. Listen, I've been on my fair share of the end of those things. I get it, okay? It's left us offended. Now the idea of trying to get close to anyone is just repulsive. It's like, I don't want to go there because I don't know that I can go through that again. But see, the thing is if you want to go to the promised land, you're going to have to go through the battle. This is what I'm talking about. I'm saying that there are battles you're going to have to walk through. I have seen in this church since I've been pastor some things happen among people in this church and watched them handle it with absolute eloquence. I mean, things that hurt, things that have happened, and just beautifully done on both sides because they're committed to each other. I had a conversation with a member of this church just the other day, and I look at that person, and we're talking. They're like, well, I feel this way when you talk to me. And I'm like, okay, I hear that. And then they're talking, and then I realize, you know what, I feel a certain kind of way. And I said, when you say this to me, I feel like this is happening. And then we're talking through this thing. Well, what do you mean? I wouldn't want to make you feel this way. And this right here is what I'm talking about, you know. And there's just this exchange that is happening. And I encourage them because I'm like, this is healthy. This is healthy conflict. Because we're looking in the middle of this person telling me how they feel and I'm telling them how I feel. I'm looking and I'm like, we're both saying to each other, I know that you love me and that you're for me, so I can hear that. I'm just telling you, I feel like this when you say it. It hurts. And it's like, but that's not how I mean it. What am I saying? I know this sounds like a bunch of jumbled mess, but I'm trying to be very practical about what this walk looks like. This is where the problem comes, is when somebody says something a certain kind of way, or does something a certain kind of way, what we want to do because it doesn't feel comfortable is you just sweep it under the rug. The problem is that this is a pretty graphic illustration, but it serves the point, okay? Y'all still on the surfboard? Okay. Don't y'all hop off yet, okay? So you can try to sweep it under the rug, but here's the problem, is if you sweep dog poop under the rug, you might not see it, but you'll always smell it. And it sits there long enough, you'll ruin the rug and the floor and everything else. And so the thing is that when these kinds of things happen in our lives, what happens so often because of the discomfort, we just want to sweep it under the rug and move on. And we'll say things like, oh, we're good now. But are you? Are you? Because as soon as that person's name comes up in conversation, there's this kind of tension, right? I know it happened 3 years ago, but you're still upset about it. But you've forgiven them. But you've never had a conversation with them. You've never talked with them. You never tried to work that thing out. So you got to understand, this is incredibly important in the church space. But it applies to your marriage. It applies to your relationships, your workspace. Everything in your life, this right here can be applied and be lived out. But you're going to have, this is why Moses prayed this over Joshua before Joshua began to take the same mantle that Moses had. He says, I pray for strength and courage. Strength and courage. Because see, Moses had this problem with the Israelites for their entire journey. Is this thing would happen, Moses was trying to lead the best way that he knew how. Mind you, he was a shepherd leading flock, and now all of a sudden, he gets to lead 1.5 million people overnight. See how well you do with that one, bud. 1.5 million people estimated. Overnight. Sheep, people, different things. Some of them smell the same, but they're different. Okay, are y'all lightening up a little bit? I know this is heavy. So what happens is Moses has this responsibility, and then what they find is these people find everything wrong with how he's leading and what he's doing. They don't like the way he's doing it. All this man is trying to do is live in response to the Father's voice, the best way that he knows how. But these people can only see where he's not serving them exactly the way they want to be served. See, they were used to things being a certain kind of way, but then that changed. So do you see how this works in your relationships, in your church? Even with me, give me a little grace, okay? Give me a little grace. I don't know. Everybody's different, and I'm trying to deal with 75 personalities every week, okay? And not every single one of you are the same. I can say this and you find it funny. I say it here and it's like, this person's never coming back. I was just trying to be funny. But it's never the intention, but that's the thing. And so sometimes we just got to realize people are really just trying to do the best they can. Maybe they've never led 1.5 million people. Maybe they've never had this relationship right here with you. They don't know your past. They don't know and I get it. Sometimes people are just rude and malicious and mean, and that just needs to be dealt with. I get that, okay? But by and large, if we're assuming people are really just trying to be good and trying to be helpful, and there is this tension that's created, it's going to take a courage to confront that. And it's going to take a strength. And it's important that we're rooted in the place of love to keep that unity there. Because if we get close like God has really designed us to be, there's going to be plenty of opportunity for conflict. Plenty. The question is, when it comes, how are you going to walk through that? Are we going to walk through it with excellence? And if we have to be reminded before we get on our high horse, how many times have you told God sorry for the same thing that you've done 50 times? But a person misses it 4 times in a row, and you're like, well, that one's just, what a jerk. And it's like, well, we do it with God all the time. So it's this double standard that we have one expectation for ourselves, like maybe we do it okay with this person, but in other relationships, maybe not. God being one of those. So the point is that we have to begin to give space, and we have to have courage to fight these battles in life. Now, we spent some time talking specifically about relationships, but you understand it's much bigger than just your relationships. There are some difficult decisions and difficult things that you're going to have to do as a follower of Christ, and you have to be ready for that battle. You have to realize this is something I have to walk through. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, don't ask me to say that again. Can't do it. Can't do it. Just ride the wave. You got to catch the first one. There ain't another one coming. Y'all better be ready. They were doing everything right from God's eyes, but they still had to walk through the fire. They had to walk through the fire. And what you have to understand is, though you have to walk through the fire, that God is with you through that place. But you can't get on the island and do it by yourself. See, that's why this family relationship thing is so important. So this is what we learn right here in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 23. Let us hold tightly without wavering to the hope we affirm, for God can be trusted to keep his promise. Let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. This is already sounding pretty good, right? And let us not neglect our meeting together, as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. So what we want to see, and I want to marry this, what's happening in Hebrews 10, and I want to marry this to the passage we're reading right now in Exodus, all right? So one of the things that's focused on is we find first that God's faithful to his promise. His promises are yes and amen. We can take those to the bank, which should relieve a lot of pressure. Like, you don't have to perform the miracle, right? He's going to do that part for you if you'll just cooperate and work with him. But this other part of these encouraging one another in acts of love and this meeting together. What does that mean? Is what Paul is trying to get us to see is that community is extremely important. That's right. Community is important. And this is not me trying to convince you that if you want to encounter God, you've got to come specifically to Connection Church and you better be in church every week. No, that's not it at all, right? But the point is there is value in being together. There is value in community. And Paul is instructing the church, it's like, don't forsake that. Don't forsake the assembling of yourself with one another. Don't forsake that meeting point, because when you're going through your toughest times, oftentimes that's when you really, really need someone else to pick you up. And maybe you're that person that week that needs to encourage someone else. Maybe someone needs to see that act of love from you to be uplifted and encouraged. And so we, fast forward, in this case, we're rewinding back to the story that we have here with Joshua, Moses, Aaron, and Hur, and we see this very principle in action, that it takes community. Because, see, they're attacked, but you understand the attacking, they didn't just take it personal and say, well, that village is just in a mess, let's let that tribe figure it out. No. They say, if you attack this tribe over here, you've got us all. And so Moses begins to get the team together, get the family together, and say, you know what? We need to come together, and this is what we're going to do. This one's going to do this. So Joshua, I need you to pick out some men to go fight. So we've got our fighters. We got you being a general over that. I need you to address that. Moses is like, I'm going to climb up on a mountain, and I'm going to pray. And if I'm Joshua, I'm like, yeah, I bet you think that's what's going to happen, bud. Right? Because you're the leader. What are you doing on a mountain praying? What are you doing? There's a war and you're going to a mountain. It must be nice to have the high ground where the rest of us are in the thick of it. See that spirit of offense hitting you already. Listen, man, but that was not Joshua's response, was it? He's like, yes, sir. Why could Joshua do that? Because there was trust. There was trust. See, this was Joshua, the man of faith. You remember Joshua and Caleb were the ones that actually could have the vision for the promised land when they saw the giants. They were the only ones that came back with confidence that God would come through for the promise. Like, this is the Joshua we are talking about, the one who would eventually be the leader that would take them into the promised land. He had a trust because he was committed to the community and family found inside of Moses and Aaron and Hur. So when Moses gave the commandment, there was a trust there that says, if you're sending me, we're must going to be okay. And I trust that whatever you're doing is exactly whatever it is that you need to be doing. And so that's what they do. And Moses goes to the mountain and he prays. But what I find so incredibly interesting about that is Moses didn't go and try to be God's man of power for the hour. He took two people with him. He took Aaron and he took Hur. And so if you know anything about Aaron and Hur, and there's very little to know about Hur because there's only, I believe, 2 verses in the entire Bible that even reference Hur, and this is one of them, is Aaron was the chief priest, and Hur was actually a helper of Aaron, part of the family, an in-law there. And so Hur is invited to come alongside Aaron and Moses gets to the mountain, and he just begins to pray. So he takes the rod, the staff of God, and he raises it up, and he begins to pray for Joshua. And what they found was this amazing thing would happen. As long as Moses prayed and the staff was raised, Joshua would win. In other words, for Joshua to be victorious, Moses actually needed to be where he was doing what it is that he needed to be doing. But Joshua's success was dependent upon another person still contending. Joshua's success could not be won on his own. And then what we find about Moses is when Moses gets to the top of the mountain and begins to pray, his arms get tired and they fall. And so when they would fall, Joshua would suffer, and it gets to the point where he can't hold his hands up any longer. And Aaron and Hur come along each side of him to keep his arms raised. So it's not that Moses can do it by himself, but he needed other people to come alongside him. So there's a few things that I want to unpack here that I think is so important for us to get to be a community that is in unity. And I don't mean it to sound so preachery, but it works, okay? So what happens is, first thing we got to get is how practical this story is that you are not meant to do any of this by yourself. You're not. If you look to your left and to your right, in front of you and behind you, you're supposed to do it with all of those people. All of these people. Listen, you need to move from one house to another. Don't do it by yourself. Call us. Ask for help. You notice Moses didn't just go to the mountain and then get up there and complain and say, well, man, if somebody would help me with my tired arms, we might not be losing this thing. Gosh, I can't find anybody with any tenacity and vigor that is zealous, that is committed to the process, that can see my vision. What did he do? I need help. I need help. And invited them in the process. There's so much that goes undone because we're just not communicating to each other. Listen, I'm guilty of it myself. So in the past year, I've made a new rule with all of my leadership team, and I say this: do nothing by yourself. Take someone with you all the time, whether you need help or not. And I've been guilty of coming up here, and then I realize I'm breaking my own rule, and so I'll shoot somebody a text. Sent Philip the text one day, hey, I'm going to go do this. Can you come help me do this, right? Did I really need 2 hands in that particular? No, but what I wanted was a relationship. What I wanted was, and by the way, when you're stuck underneath a counter trying to screw something together, it does help for someone to hand you a screw, right? It's not the worst thing in the world. But The point is that there's these opportunities that are before us, and we end up going through and even missing it or not hitting the mark, not because God didn't give us all the resources, but because we fail to see people for who they are and value them appropriately. Because, see, if you valued people, you would ask for that help. Because you would see that there was something to give. But the reason why we don't is because you think you can do it by yourself, or maybe there is a bit of, you're working through it. I don't feel comfortable with this yet, which I get too, okay? But that, again, is part of establishing that love and that trust so that we can have the courage and strength that even if you see the value over there and you don't feel comfortable yet, that can rise up in you to say, you know what, I'm going to ask right now. Because us accomplishing this task is bigger than my insecurity in this moment. And we understand that perfect love casts out fear, so we don't have to allow ourselves to live in response to fear and insecurity, but we can live in response to the confidence that God wants to give to us. And we learn that we're stronger and better together for it. So that's the practical side of Aaron and Hur. And then there is the spiritual discipline side of Aaron and Hur, which is this, is that Aaron was the priest and would have symbolized what it was like to live in the place of devotion and presence. And then Hur is the practical helper. So in other words, in order to be successful, not only do we need people, but we need to make sure that we're executing well lives of devotion and pursuing God, that we live in response to the Father, that we're allowing God to be the center of everything that we do. Like we're not just, again, I say this a lot on Sunday mornings. We're not going through the motions. We're not going through the motions. Why do I do that? Not to get you tired of hearing what I'm saying, but I'm trying to make sure it's so ingrained in us that we will never go through the motions. I don't care how many times we do this, how many years we do it. We're not going to approach it with a sense of familiarity. We're going to keep the fire kindled in our heart towards God, just like we should do in our relationships and our marriages. Right? Don't just don't allow your spouse to just be ordinary and mundane. Keep that thing going. Right? So it is with God. So it is with God. And there's so much joy and gratification that everybody gets from it when we do that. Okay? So there is that spiritual side of that. And then there's the spiritual discipline where Hur would have been the one to actually go get the materials and bring it. In other words, it's not just sitting in your closet and saying, God, make it happen. Just do it right now. But a piece of saying, well, what if he says to do it, it means you've got to take action. So there is this practicality that, like, if you want to see people come to God, maybe you're going to have to take some action and do it. If you want to see your church grow, maybe you're going to have to invite a few people and just love on them. You know what I mean? And not try to create create a valley before you create a bridge. Just be love to people and be good to people. Maybe you're going to have to do the practical side of things. Like, I wish I could just snap my fingers and say, kitchen be clean. But if I want a clean kitchen, I say, God, I just ask, Lord, that you just get this kitchen clean and resourced. And he's like, well, I've given you good health, 2 arms, 2 legs, money to buy cleaning supplies, and you're still fussing that the kitchen ain't clean. And then I realized what I really meant is, God, send somebody else to do it, like my wife. Because that's also our prayer, is like, if we want to see this done, it's like, send somebody, but we're not willing ourselves. And that's one of the things that I always try to practice in my own life, especially as a leader. Before I ever ask anybody in this room to do anything at all, that I must be willing to do it myself. And many times I do it before I ever ask you. And what I found is that now the Lord has so blessed me and surrounded me with people who take initiative, and now those are the kind of people that they are. That God has sent me those kind of people. I got a call one night. I know this is super practical, but I want to be practical for you guys. Like, this stuff has to be livable, right? So I got a call one night. The youth group was having their thing, and it turns out that one of the toilets, and it's always going to be the men's bathroom, because you ladies take care of things. But one of the toilets in the men's bathroom just all but blew up, and I think there was a little leftovers. So the point is that we had ankle deep water in the church. These folks called me, the leaders called me, and there's volunteers that are not even typically part of that leaders, but these leaders came together and they just cleaned it up. They didn't have the resources to clean it. Here at the church, they go to their homes and get their own things, bring it, call me after the fact and say, hey, this thing happened, want to let you know it happened, but it's cleaned up, ready to go. What? That's exactly right. That's what it should look like. Now, the next day it happened again, and I was over there vacuuming it up and changing toilets with another person in our church. And but the point is that job I couldn't do by myself. I had to call someone else to help me, and they came. But that's what I'm talking about. This is what this practically looks like, of seeing needs and being willing yourself to go fulfill those. So it's not just being stuck away in your prayer closet or being this powerful worshiper or a powerful speaker, but also being willing to roll up your sleeves and get down and just do the work. It's going to take both if you want to win the battles in your life. It's going to take people, it's going to take a spiritual depth, and it's going to take true spiritual discipline to do that. And the third thing that I want you to see from the representation of Aaron and Hur is this, is we understand, as I've established, that Aaron is the priest. And remember, Jesus is called our high priest, and Hur would have been our helper, and the Holy Spirit is called our helper. So not only are you doing it with people, not only are you doing it in a practical way, but you're not doing it by yourself and with people, you're doing it with God. And that God is in the works of everything that you're doing. So when your hands get tired, you have people, you have processes, and you have the Father, you have the Son, and you have the Holy Spirit. All of these things are working to keep you going. How much of that are you using? And see, that's the catch right there, because see, what positioned Moses to be able to receive help from Aaron and Hur, before that happened, it says this: he sat on a rock. He sat on a rock. And you know that Jesus is our rock. He is the cornerstone of our faith. So in other words, what this really looks like is anything that we do must come from being anchored on Christ, because when we're anchored on Christ, there is this lifestyle of rest versus striving. See, before Moses sat on the rock, he was striving for the breakthrough, but the moment he sat down, he was able to rest. And it's actually from the place of rest that he became most efficient and powerful to do what God had set for him to do, but he had to first see his need to reposition himself. And see, some of us just need a bit of a reposition, or a bit of an adjustment of getting out of this lifestyle of just constant performance, trying to do it all by ourselves, because frankly, you've had to. I get that. You've had to. You've been alone. You've been burned. You've been offended. You've been left to hang out to dry. I get it. Okay? But what we're trying to do here is give a permission to not let that be the end of your story. To come to a place of learning that you can rest inside and trust Him, and that you can count on the people around you and God Himself to help raise up your arms, to strengthen, to empower, and to encourage you, so that every battle you face can be victorious. Because there's a Joshua that's dependent upon you getting it. Everybody has a Joshua. Everybody has a Joshua. And the thing is when we miss it on any of these parts that I just listed, what we're really doing is not compromising ourselves or building our own egos, but we're counting our Joshua, or we're hurting our Joshuas. We're hurting our Joshuas that are down on the front lines going for us, whether they voluntarily do it or not. Listen, for those that you have kids in the room, you have Joshuas. For those of you that have colleagues and coworkers that you have to work as a team, you have Joshuas. For those of you that volunteer with others in this room, you have Joshuas. And the more you sit there and try to do it in your own strength, in your own might, and you try to grit your way through it all of the time, and you're not able to follow through, you are costing them whether you realize it or not. Why? Because we are a family. So whether you like it or not, whether you choose to get connected or not, it affects us. It affects the people in this room. Whether you're cognizant of it or not cognizant of it. If you do life here with these people, when you don't step up to the plate, it gets everybody, whether you see it or not. Everybody, in many different ways. And not only that, but the reverse is true. When we really give it our best and we commit to this process, and we even commit to the messiness of it, because how many of you know that battles are messy? They're a little chaotic. It feels overwhelming. But how many of you know that just lets you know you're probably at the right place if you wore the armor of God? You're probably at the right place. If it's a little bit of that going on, it's okay. But we have to stay so committed to that process, because when we do that, we also have a great, great opportunity to impact them so that other people can win. So not only do our losses make other people lost, but our wins empower other people to win. And that, to me, is something that's so encouraging and so exciting about all of this, is now you truly understand that you are stronger together. You are more effective together, and that your decisions and the things that you do or don't do, whether you're cognizant of it or not, impact the people around you. And now, having heard that, do you allow that honor to shift in your heart for it? Do you make the shift? Do you make the shift in position? Because for us to continue to go from glory to glory, honor to honor, and strength to strength, we have to be in a place of continual shifting. We have to be okay with that. We have to make those, even if not for yourself, for the people around you, for the people that are watching you, looking up to you, seeing you. It's important. So I'll end with this. Victories are won when there is unity in community. So not only do we need to have all of these other infrastructures in place, but it's really important that we have this unity of vision, purpose, and pursuit. Unity of vision, purpose, and pursuit. And I'll give this to you pretty quick, because in the beginning of the year, we'll take a deep dive into some of these things. But for the Israelites, their vision was, we need to enter the promised land. We need to enter the promised land. And for their purpose right now, it was a joint victory. And their pursuit was this battle. But they found commonality. They found something that they could get around. For us, there are a lot of things that I envision. Some of that I've already shared for us. Like, one is I would like to see us to be a diverse church that has unity central to what we do, that we look as diverse as the kingdom of God, right? That we understand that our mission here at Connection Church is we're a place where people can actually encounter God, connect with one another, and be empowered and equipped to live out their purpose. That we're not going through the motions. We're not telling you all these things are available and then not experiencing, but that we are contending to have authentic experiences in all of these levels. And then, of course, our pursuit has to be central, which is always God. That subject for us never changes. Jesus has to be the center of everything that we do. And when we do that, we get an appropriate affection for people. We can serve people well when we see God right, because we have the heart of God towards those people.